Okay, so we're going to start with this problem, and this problem is going to be a little bit of review for us, and then we're going to see in the future how to do this a little bit of a different way. So first thing I would do with this problem is when I'm looking to graph this thing, we can't graph it in this form because we don't know what that looks like, so we're going to try to graph it in factored form. How I'm going to do that is I notice when I look across that all of these share an x. So I'm actually going to divide this thing by a negative x to kind of pull that, or they share two x's. So I'm going to divide this by negative 2x to kind of get everything through. So that would leave me with x squared minus x minus 2. And again, the reason I pull out that negative sign is you don't want a number in front of your first term. Well then, right here, we could look at this and go, okay, that would factor further. That would become x minus 2 and x plus 1. And now we could see that this thing is in factored form. So it's because this thing here is in factored form, we now could make a graph. And we just give it some tick marks. And we could graph the zeros. We know we're going to have a 0 at 0, we're going to have a 0 at 2, and we're going to have a 0 at negative 1. So that's where we will plot them. 2 and negative 1. Then we just have to kind of see what the line does. Again, we got to decide if it starts up here or down here. To do that, what you generally do is you plug in a negative number for all of these things. So when you plug in a negative number and you square it, it becomes positive, but there's a negative sign sitting out there, so that's a negative. When I throw in a negative number here, it's just going to stay negative because nothing's going to square it. When we throw a negative number into here, it's going to stay negative because there's nothing to square it. So you'd find that you'd get negative, negative, negative. Well, negative times a negative times a negative gives you a negative. So this graph is going to start down here, and it's going to go up to negative 1. And you look, what shape does this make? Well, it makes a line, so it's going to go through straight through. Then I'm going to go to my 0 point, and I go, what shape does that make? Oh, it makes a U, so it's going to bounce. Then I go to this, what shape does that make? Oh, it makes a line, so it's going to go through. So this is how we graphed our quadratics in the past. We want to get it into what we would call factored form, which we've gotten a lot better at the other couple days. And then once you get into this factored form, now you can find its intercepts and then go through and graph it. Okay. Let's try another problem. Now let's say I'm supposed to graph this. Now when you look across, I have not shown you how to graph things that have 4 terms to them. And you also should notice that there's nothing we can kind of take out. So for this one, because it won't factor, we can't really get into a factored form. I'd probably rely on my graphing calculator. So we're going to take out our graphing calculator. We're going to hit y equals, because that's the graphing part. And then once we got that, we're going to plug everything we have in there. So we're going to say x to the third minus x to the second plus x minus 2. Then I'm going to hit graph. And we can kind of see what that shape looks like. I'm going to adjust the window to try to see more of it. If you want to try to see more of the graph, you can increase your y max or your y min. So we can kind of get a little bit better of a picture of that. I'm going to actually go for the y min, make that negative 100. Whoops, not 100. Negative 100. And hit graph. And we get a really good shape of this graph. This graph kind of makes this squiggle. Now you can kind of see where you would get your two U shapes from. you have a U shape right here, and then you have that second U shape right there. And so you can see here's my first U shape, there's my second, that's why it's a third degree. But on here, because that U shape doesn't go down very far, it's kind of a squiggle. So this graph is a squiggle, and that's what it would look like. Now they may ask you for certain things like, what are its x-intercepts? Or another way of saying this is, what is its roots? So if you need to find a root, what you need to do is you need to go into your settings. And the settings that you want to go into is you want to say y equals, and you want to find where this thing intersects the axis, or when this thing is 0. Then we're going to click second and then calculate. So we're going to calculate this thing. We're going to go to its intersection point. And that's our first curve, is our line. Our second one, as you can see, is the x-axis. And we would hit enter. And our root is at, and we'll just write this down, 1.35. That's what it gave me, right? Yep, 1.35. You could keep going, but it seems that we don't have any more there. If you actually trace along this line, you can see that this keeps going down. So it actually only crosses that x-axis, it looks like, in that one spot, that one teeny tiny spot, which is fine. Because that means we have one real root and then two imaginary roots. But we don't need to find our imaginary roots right now. We don't need to find that. We know that we have one real root. They may also ask for a factor. Well, the factor of this thing would just be x minus 1.35. And that would be our answer. Let's try another one. Let's take this problem right here, and now we're going to look for its root, and then we're going to find its factor. So for this problem right here, what I would do is, again, we want to see what this thing looks like graphed. So we're going to go to this, and we're going to type in our new one, which is 2x plus 4. Don't need any of that. We're going to hit graph. Now you can see on this one, it looks like it's going to bounce here and then bounce. It looks like it's a little bit hard to see, so I'm going to zoom in just a bit more. If I can get my window right. It's negative 10, 10. Hopefully that puts us more close to the axis. There we go. Okay, so now we get a better view of it. So when we're zoomed out, we got a good view of the big picture. But when we zoom in, we get a better view of the little picture. And we can see that this thing has one real root right around here. So to find that, we'll hit second calculate. We'll go down to intersect. And we found its one real root, which is at negative 2. Then if we want to write that as a factor, we would say that's x plus 2. And again, this thing really does have 3 roots. It just only has one root that's real and 2 that are imaginary. So that's how we'd go about doing that question. Let's go through one last topic. Okay, so the last thing we're going to touch is talking about increasing and decreasing and then positive and negative. So here's the first thing I'm going to do. Oops, if I get my pen. We're going to find out where this thing is increasing at. So I just look where the graph is going up. So it's going down here. It hits at this point right here. And then it's going up till it gets to there. Then it goes on its slope back down till it hits to here. And then it goes back up. So it's increasing in those spots. See where it's decreasing at. Well, it goes down to right here. And then it goes down to right there. So it's increasing in 2 spots and it's decreasing in 2 spots. Let's label the spots it's increasing at. So it's increasing from this point right there at negative 2. And it's increasing all the way up to this point right here, which is at 0. Now we can see on this, whoops. And the reason I called this 0 is because we always label it by the x's. So we can see this one was at -2 right here, and this one was at 0. Now we're going to do that with the next one. This one, I think I made a mistake back there. That one is not a tick mark at 2, it's halfway in between. So this wouldn't be at -2. It would actually be at -1.5. So this one would start increasing at +1.5. Again, we're taking this from that x-axis and going all the way up to infinity. Okay? Now let's look where it's decreasing at. It looks like it's decreasing from -infinity all the way to that point that we had at -1.5. So all the way from -infinity to 1.5. And then we have the other one where it's going to start here again at that line right there, which is 0, and it's going to go all the way to our +1.5. So that was our increasing and decreasing. Now let's see if we can find its positive and its negative. So it's positive anywhere above the x-axis. So right here it's positive, from here it's positive, and from here it's positive. And anywhere below the x-axis, it's negative. So from here it's negative, and from here it's negative. So when we look at this, I'm going to write these up here to make it easier. So I'm going to write this one up here. It looks like it's positive from -infinity all the way to that point right there at -2. And another one we would have is this point right here at -1 all the way to +1. And another point we'd have is this point here at 2, and it goes all the way to infinity. So that's where this thing is positive at. Let's look where this thing is negative at. Well, this thing is negative here and here. So it's negative from -2 to -1, and it's negative from 1 to 2. So how we decide all of these different things is we just kind of look where they appear on the graph and see the start and end point. Try the different problems for today.